She needed money to save her father's life. He needed an heir to save his family name. That was how the story began. The pen trembled in Isabella Miller's hand as she stared down at the final page of the contract. Her name looked foreign, written in elegant ink across the sterile white paper, as though someone else had signed away her body and her future. The conference room was too quiet, the air heavy with the scent of expensive leather and antiseptic. Across from her, the lawyer in a charcoal suit adjusted his glasses and slid the final page toward her. "You understand the terms, Miss Miller," he said in a voice that had no trace of sympathy. 6 months, all medical procedures, living expenses, and compensation outlined here. Confidentiality is absolute. Failure to comply results in termination of payment. Isabella nodded, though her throat felt too tight to speak. Her father's hospital bills flashed through her mind like a cruel reminder. The machines keeping him alive cost more each week than she made in a year at the small-town library. The doctors had said there was hope if they could afford one more round of treatment. Hope always came with a price. She forced herself to sign the last page. The sound of her pen scratching across the paper echoed in the silence. The lawyer smiled faintly, gathering the documents into a folder. "Congratulations, Miss Miller. Mr. Wolf's assistant will be in touch to arrange your relocation. The procedure is scheduled for Friday." Procedure. The word made her stomach twist. When she stepped outside into the cold city air, the towering glass buildings of Wolf Industries seemed to close around her like walls. She pulled her coat tighter, wishing she could breathe again. That night, she sat by her father's bedside in the hospital. His eyes fluttered open briefly, weak but still filled with warmth. "You're doing too much, being Ella," he murmured. "You need to live your life, not sacrifice it for me." She smiled through the ache in her chest. "It's just a temporary job, Dad. Everything will be fine soon." He squeezed her hand, too tired to question further. She couldn't tell him the truth, that she had agreed to carry a stranger's child to keep him alive. The next morning, she was taken to a mansion on the edge of the city. It looked more like a fortress, all steel and glass, perched above the frozen lake. Inside, everything gleamed with cold perfection. A housekeeper escorted her through silent hallways to a suite that looked like a 5-star hotel. "Mr. Wolf will meet you tonight," the woman said simply. "Tonight?" Isabella's voice caught. "I thought there would be doctors." The woman hesitated, lowering her gaze. "Mr. Wolf prefers a natural conception. He believes it ensures a stronger heir." Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. "But I was told it would be clinical." "His lawyers make the decisions. Mr. Wolf makes the rules." When the door closed behind her, Isabella sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. She had imagined sterile white rooms, medical instruments, impersonal professionals. She had not imagined this, being told she would share a bed with a man she had never even met. As evening fell, the mansion changed. Lights dimmed, candles flickered, and the air filled with faint music from somewhere distant. Every sound made her heart race. She stood by the window, staring at her reflection. She looked small, frightened, and completely out of place in the silk dress laid out for her. A knock came, slow, deliberate. She turned, her breath catching as the door opened. He stood there, tall and composed, dressed in black. His eyes were a storm, unreadable, yet piercing. Adrian Wolf. The name that had become a legend in the financial world, wispy, read with awe and envy. "Miss Miller," he said quietly, his voice smooth but distant. "Thank you for agreeing to this." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. His gaze softened slightly when he saw her fear. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, stepping closer. "This is an arrangement, a transaction. It will be over soon." But something in his tone betrayed him. Beneath the control, there was a trace of loneliness, of something human. Isabella nodded, her fingers twisting in the fabric of her dress. She wanted to run, to hide, to undo the signature that bound her to him. Yet when he reached out to take her trembling hand, she didn't pull away. The air between them felt charged, fragile, and terrifyingly alive. In that moment, as the clock ticked toward midnight, Isabella realized she was about to cross a line she could never return from, and that the man before her, cold and powerful as he seemed, might be the one person capable of breaking her heart before the night was over. The night had fallen heavy and silent over the Wolf mansion. Rain pressed softly against the tall windows like 1,000 whispered secrets. Isabella stood in the middle of the grand bedroom, her heart pounding as if it wanted to break free. She had never felt so small in her life. The room glowed with golden light, and the scent of sandalwood filled the air. Every sound echoed: the faint ticking of the clock, the distant hum of thunder, the uneven rhythm of her own breath. The door opened quietly. Adrian Wolf entered, his steps firm yet slow, like a man fighting a war inside himself. He wore no tie now, only a dark shirt rolled at the sleeves. His face was unreadable, calm yet shadowed by something that looked like pain. "You don't have to do this," he said in a low voice, stopping a few feet away from her, his eyes locked on hers. Isabella could barely speak. "I signed the contract," she whispered. "If I walk away now, they will take everything from me. My father will lose his treatment." He looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tightening. "I never meant for this to be cruel," he said. "It already is," she replied softly, her hands trembling. A silence stretched between them, filled with the storm outside. Lightning flashed, and for a second she saw the truth in his eyes. Not power, not arrogance, but loneliness so deep it almost hurt to look at. Adrian took a step closer, and then another. He reached out as if to touch her face, but stopped inches away. His voice was rough when he spoke again. "You said you've never been with anyone." She nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, never." He turned away, running a hand through his hair as if the admission burned him. "This was supposed to be simple, clinical, detached," he said half to himself. But nothing about this felt detached, not when she looked at him with those frightened eyes that carried so much courage, not when he realized that for the first time in years someone was looking at him not as a millionaire, but as a man. Isabella took a breath and whispered, "What happens now?" He looked back at her, the stormlight glinting off his face. Now he said, "We stop pretending this is just business." Her heart stumbled in her chest. Adrian moved closer until she could feel his breath. He lifted her chin gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. The air seemed to thicken between them, time slowing to a fragile stillness. "You can still walk away," he said softly. "And let my father die," she answered. "No, I can't." His expression changed then, as if something inside him broke. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering for just a moment longer than he meant to. "I don't want to hurt you, Isabella," he said, "but I don't know how to be gentle anymore." "Then learn," she whispered. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then the thunder cracked again, and he kissed her, not with hunger, but with hesitation, like a man rediscovering what it meant to feel alive. The night that began as a contract turned into something neither could explain. His hands trembled against her skin. Hers clung to his shirt and between. Every breath was the sound of two hearts learning a rhythm that had nothing to do with duty or money. When it was over, the candles had burned low, and the storm outside had softened to a whisper. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Isabella pulled the sheet around her and turned toward him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What does this mean now?" He looked up, his eyes dark and searching. "It means I'm in trouble," she frowned. "Why?" "Because he said quietly, I wasn't supposed to fall in love tonight." The words hung in the air like lightning just before it strikes, and Isabella knew that whatever this was, it would not end simply. Something powerful had begun, something that would destroy the walls they both had built. The morning light slipped through the curtains, soft and golden, touching the edge of the bed where Isabella lay awake. Her body still trembling with memories of the night before, she could hear his slow, steady breathing beside her, and for a moment she wished the world would stop right there. Just silence and warmth and the strange new ache in her heart that felt too big to hold. When she turned her head, Adrian was already awake, watching her, his eyes dark and unreadable. He looked different, softer, almost human without the armor of control that had surrounded him last night, but the silence between them was heavy. Neither knew what to say. She rose quietly, pulling the sheet around herself as she stood by the window. The mansion outside looked endless, cold, and perfect, like the life he lived without love. She thought of her father lying alone in the hospital, unaware of the price his daughter had paid. She pressed her hand to her chest, wondering if she had just given away something she could never get back. Adrian spoke finally, his voice quiet. "Are you all right?" She nodded without turning. "Yes." He sat up too. His sheet falling from his shoulders, revealing the scar that ran down his chest. A long pale reminder of something violent. He noticed her eyes on it. "An accident," he said 10 years ago. "The woman I loved didn't make it. I swore never to let anyone get close again." His confession hung in the air, raw and unexpected. Isabella turned slowly, meeting his eyes. "And yet here you are?" she whispered. He looked away as if the words hurt. "I didn't mean for this to happen. You weren't supposed to be different." "Different how?" she asked. He gave a broken smile. "Because you made me feel something I thought was dead." For a moment neither spoke. Only the ticking of the clock filled the space between them. Then the intercom buzzed, a sharp, cold sound cutting through the intimacy. His assistant's voice echoed. "Sir, the board meeting starts in 15 minutes and your mother is waiting in the main hall." Adrian stood quickly, his entire demeanor shifting back into the man of power, the one the world feared. He grabbed his shirt and buttoned it fast, his voice now detached. "Stay here until my driver returns. You'll be escorted home later." "Home," she repeated the word like it was foreign, her heart sinking. "It's safer this way," he said, not looking at her. Isabella wanted to scream. Safer for who? But she bit her lip and nodded instead. When the door closed behind him, she sat down on the bed, her hands shaking, tears slipping down her face. She told herself it didn't matter, that it had all been part of the deal, but her heart refused to listen. Hours later, she walked through the marble hallway, escorted by a driver. The silence felt endless until she noticed a figure standing near the staircase. An older woman dressed in pearls, her eyes sharp with curiosity and power. "You must be Miss Miller," the woman said, her smile polite but cold. "I'm Evelyn Wolfe, Adrian's mother." Isabella froze. Instinct told her to bow her head, but she couldn't. "Speak." Evelyn studied her like a rare animal, then leaned closer. "So this is the girl." He broke his own rule for interesting. "You do realize, dear, that people like my son don't marry women like you." The words cut deep, but before she could reply, a familiar voice spoke from behind Evelyn. "Mother enough." Adrian's tone was calm, but dangerous. His eyes met Isabella's for a fleeting second, filled with something like regret. Evelyn smiled tightly and walked away, leaving behind the faint scent of perfume and poison. Adrian didn't speak until his mother disappeared down the corridor. "I'm sorry about that. She doesn't understand boundaries. It's fine," Isabella said quietly, but her voice shook. Nothing about this was fine. He stepped closer as if he wanted to reach for her, but stopped. "You'll receive the payments as promised, and a doctor will visit regularly for your health. You don't need to contact me directly anymore." And just like that, he turned and walked away again, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. When the car drove her back to her apartment that afternoon, Isabella pressed her hand against her stomach, an uneasy feeling curling inside her. She didn't know if it was fear or something else. As she stepped inside her small room, she looked up at the fading sky outside and whispered to herself, "I will not cry over a man who bought my body, but not my heart." Yet as she lay down that night, the tears came anyway, and in the darkness miles away, Adrian sat alone in his office, staring at the same contract he had once signed, and whispered the same truth to himself. "I wasn't supposed to care, but I do." 3 weeks passed like a blur, and Isabella tried to convince herself that what happened that night had been nothing more than a mistake, but her heart refused to listen. She went to work at the library every day, pretending to be fine, yet every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian Wolfe's face and felt the echo of his touch. She hated herself for missing him, for dreaming of a man who had turned their night into silence. The morning sickness began quietly. The first time she thought it was Saint Res. The second time she knew it was something more. She stood in the bathroom, gripping the small white stick between her fingers, when the 2 faint lines appeared. Her knees nearly gave out. She sank to the floor, whispering no over and over, though deep down she knew the truth. She was carrying his child. A mix of fear and wonder filled her chest. She touched her stomach softly, unable to stop the tears that came uninvited. She should have called his lawyer to report the pregnancy as the contract required, but something inside her rebelled. She didn't want this to become another transaction. This was life growing inside her. This was hers. That night, she heard a knock at the door. Her breath caught when she saw a man in a suit holding a bouquet of lilies. "Good evening, Miss Miller." "A delivery from Mr. Wolfe," he said, handing her the flowers and a small envelope. She signed quietly and shut the door before opening it. Inside was a single line written in Adrian's bold handwriting. "Take care of yourself." No signature, no explanation, just those 5 words. But they burned in her mind all night at the Wolfe mansion. Adrian sat alone in his study, surrounded by darkness. He had tried to focus on business meetings and investments, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face the way she had looked at him that morning before he left the bed. The memory tore through him until he could barely breathe when his assistant informed him she had confirmed the pregnancy. He felt a wave of something he couldn't name, not fear, not joy, something deeper. He wanted to see her, but his mother had already warned him. Any connection would risk scandal and control of the company, so he kept his distance. Watching her life through quiet channels, he hired a private doctor under her name, ensuring her safety without revealing himself. It was the only way he knew how to protect her, but protection and love are never the same. One afternoon, as Isabella left the library, she noticed a black car parked across the street. It had been there 3 days now. She tried to ignore it, but every time she glanced up, the same tinted window reflected her face. She felt her pulse quicken. Who was watching her that night? She called the number of the doctor Adrian had assigned, but it went straight to voicemail. Fear settled inside her apartment like a shadow. The next day she went to the hospital for a checkup. The nurse smiled as the heartbeat filled the room, a tiny rhythmic sound like wings against her ribs. "You're about 8 weeks, the nurse said softly. "The baby sounds strong." Isabella smiled for the first time in days, clutching the small ultrasound picture. When she stepped out of the clinic, rain had begun to fall. She walked slowly through the streets. When headlights flashed too close, she froze. A car skidded to a stop inches from her. Her umbrella dropped and she stumbled backward. The driver stepped out, dressed in black, his voice sharp. "Are you all right, Miss Miller?" She recognized him immediately. Adrian's security chief. He looked tense. He opened the car door quickly. "Get in now. Mr. Wolfe sent me." Her heart raced. "Why? What's happening?" "No time to explain. He said someone leaked your name. The media thinks you're his mistress. Reporters are outside your building." Her mind spun. She climbed into the car, trembling as the rain beat harder against the glass. They sped through the city lights toward a place she thought she'd never see again. The Wolfe mansion. When the doors opened, Adrian stood waiting at the bottom of the stairs, his face pale. His eyes stormed with emotion. She wanted to scream at him to demand answers, but when he stepped forward and whispered, "Are you hurt?" all the anger melted away. He took her hand without asking, leading her inside past the flashing cameras and chaos outside, and when the doors closed behind them, the world fell silent again. "You're safe now," he said. But the way he said it sounded more like a confession than a promise. The mansion was no longer silent. That night, thunder rolled across the sky and flashes of lightning danced across the glass walls. Adrian stood near the window, his reflection fractured by the rain. He had spent years building this fortress to keep the world out. But now the woman sitting quietly on his couch had managed to walk through every wall he had ever built. Isabella sat wrapped in a blanket, her hair damp from the rain, her eyes fixed on the fire that burned in the fireplace. She had not spoken since arriving. Her silence felt heavier than the storm outside. Adrian finally turned to her, his voice low. "You shouldn't have been out there alone. Someone could have hurt you." Her head lifted slowly. "Someone already did," she said softly. "You." The words hit him harder than any accusation he had ever faced in a boardroom. He took a slow breath, trying to explain. "I was trying to protect you. Everything I did was for your safety. Protection," she repeated bitterly. "Locking me away, hiding me from the world. Calling me a secret is not protection, Adrian. It's shame." He moved closer but stopped when she flinched. "I never meant to make you feel like that," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought if I stayed away, it would make things easier for you. Then why do I feel like I'm the one paying for your mistakes?" she asked, her eyes glistening with tears. "I didn't ask to be part of your legacy. I just wanted to save my father." Her words cut through the silence. He wanted to tell her that since the moment she had walked into his life, nothing had been the same, that her laughter had followed him through empty rooms and sleepless nights. Instead, he whispered, "I think about you every day." Her breath caught in her throat. "Don't say that," she whispered. "Please don't make it harder." Before he could answer, the door opened suddenly. His mother, Evelyn, strode in, her heels striking the marble like gunshots. Adrian turned sharply. "Mother, this is not the time." She ignored him, her eyes cold as ice as she looked at Isabella. "So this is the girl carrying our future," she said, every syllable sharp with disgust. "My son's reputation is hanging by a thread, and you bring this chaos into our home." Isabella rose, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "I never wanted your money or your name. I only wanted to help someone I love." Evelyn's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Then you've done your job, dear. Take the payment and disappear before you ruin what's left of him." Adrian stepped between them, his anger boiling enough. "Mother, you will not speak to her like that." She lifted an eyebrow. "She is an employee, not your equal, and certainly not your future." His voice rose louder than the thunder outside. "She's carrying my child, and she means more to me than this entire empire." The room went still. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. Evelyn's expression faltered, but only for a moment. Then she said coldly, "If you love her, you will destroy everything you built," and walked out, leaving a storm behind her. Isabella stared at him, shocked. "You shouldn't have said that. Now she'll destroy us both." He turned to her, his eyes full of fire. "Let her try." "I won't lose you again." She shook her head, tears spilling down her face. "You don't understand. I can't live in your world. Adrian, it's built on secrets and power, and I can't breathe in it." He reached for her, but she stepped back. "Please, just let me go. Don't," he whispered. But she was already walking toward the door, each step breaking him a little more. She stopped only once to look back, her voice trembling. "I'm not your contract anymore, and I never will be again." When the door closed behind her, Adrian felt the mansion grow colder than it had ever been. He sank to the floor, his hands over his face. The storm outside raged, but it was nothing compared to the one tearing through his chest. Hours later, he found the letter she had left on his desk, sealed with shaking handwriting inside it, only 5 words that cut deeper than any wound I loved. "You too late." Rain poured over the city, like it was trying to wash away everything that had been broken. Adrian drove aimlessly through the empty streets, headlights cutting through the darkness. His chest burned with regret. Every word she had said echoed inside his mind like a punishment. He had built empires on logic and control, but now nothing made sense. He had let the only person who made him feel human walk away. Isabella was gone without a trace, her apartment empty. Her phone disconnected. The driver who had once been assigned to her said she had left quietly in the night with only a small suitcase. No one knew where she had gone. Adrian searched hospitals, churches, and boarding houses, but she had vanished like a dream, fading with the dawn. 3 weeks passed. He didn't attend board meetings. He barely slept. His company ran without him like a body without a soul. His mother tried to reach him, but he refused to see her. The moment I lost her, I lost myself. He told his reflection one morning, staring into the mirror that no longer recognized him, somewhere far away in a small coastal town. Isabella found shelter in an old guest house near the sea. The air smelled of salt and freedom. She took small jobs tutoring children to earn enough for food. The baby inside her grew stronger every day. She often sat on the balcony, touching her stomach, whispering to the life she carried, "You are the only part of him I can keep." One evening, as the sun melted into the water, she saw a familiar face in the distance, a man she recognized from Adrian's world, the security chief who had once driven her through the rain. She froze when he approached. "I come with a message from Mr. Wolf," he said quietly. "I told him not to contact me," she said, her voice trembling. "He doesn't know I'm here," the man replied. "He's changed. He's destroying himself without you. I thought you should know." Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head. "Tell him I'm fine. Tell him to live his life and forget me." She turned and walked away before the man could say more. That night she sat by the sea, clutching the locket Adrian had once left on her bedside table, engraved with a single word, hope. She opened it to find a folded note she had never seen before inside. Written in his familiar handwriting, it said, "When the world becomes too heavy, look for the light you left in me." The wind carried her sobs out toward the ocean. She didn't know that at the same moment Adrian was in his study, staring at an ultrasound photo his private doctor had sent him, without her consent. His hands shook as he traced the tiny outline of the child. His child. He picked up the phone call. Every hospital, every clinic, every boarding house. "Find her," he said, his voice cracking. Days later, a call came in. "She's alive, sir, but you need to come now. She's in the hospital. Complications, early labor." Adrian's blood turned to ice. "Tell me where." He drove through the night, breaking every law to reach her. When he arrived, the storm had returned. Violent and unforgiving doctors rushed through the corridor shouting orders. He caught a glimpse of her through the glass, pale, fragile, and too still. "Sir, you can't go in," a nurse protested, but he shoved the door open, his voice breaking Isabella. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered weakly. She tried to speak, but no words came. He held her hand, whispering, "Please hold on. Please don't leave me. Not like this." The machines beeped faster. Chaos filled the room, and then the sound that changed everything. The cry of a newborn, small, desperate, and alive. Adrian looked down at the tiny child wrapped in white. The nurse whispered, "It's a girl." He turned back to Isabella. Her eyes half open, a faint smile on her lips. She whispered in a voice barely there, "You found me." He nodded, tears falling. "Yes, I found you, and I'm never letting go again." Her fingers touched his cheek one last time before she slipped into unconscious, leaving him with the child in his arms and the storm still raging outside. The world, inside the hospital, felt frozen, as if time had stopped moving. Adrian sat beside Isabella's bed, his hand gripping hers, refusing to let go. Machines beeped softly around them, a fragile reminder that she was still alive, but barely. Her skin was pale, her lips almost colorless. She had lost too much blood. The doctors said she was stable but unconscious. Adrian could hear their voices, but none of it mattered. He looked at her face and whispered, "Please wake up. I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I finally understand what love means." The newborn slept in a small cradle beside the bed, wrapped in a pink blanket. The sound of her soft breathing filled the room. Adrian reached out and touched the tiny hand that curled around his finger. She looked so small, so fragile, yet her existence felt like the only proof that life could still be kind. He named her Lily because she had been born in the middle of a storm and still bloomed. Outside the hospital, cameras flashed, reporters surrounded the entrance. The world had found out the secret of Adrian Wolfe, the billionaire with a hidden lover and an illegitimate child. His mother, Evelyn, tried to control the damage, meeting lawyers and publicists to clean up the scandal. But for the first time, Adrian didn't care about reputation or headlines. He only cared about the woman fighting for her life inside that room. On the third night, something strange happened. As he sat watching Isabella, he noticed a nurse he hadn't seen before walking quietly into the room. She moved differently, her posture too straight, too purposeful. Adrian frowned. "Excuse me, who are you?" The woman turned slowly, removing her mask, and for a second he couldn't breathe. It was Evelyn. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. His mother set down a small box on the table, her expression unreadable. "I came to see the child," she said calmly. "She's my granddaughter, after all." "You lost that right the moment you tried to destroy her mother," he said through clenched teeth. Evelyn looked at Isabella, lying motionless. Her voice softened. "She reminds me of someone, your father's secretary, the woman who saved his life once. He never told me, but I found out later she was carrying his child too. I made sure that secret disappeared before it ruined our name." She paused, glancing at him. "I thought I was protecting our family, but I was only repeating the same cruelty I once caused." Adrian stared at her, unable to speak. She continued, "I spoke to the doctors. She needs a rare blood type, the same one I have. I already donated for her." The words hit him like thunder. "You did what?" Her eyes glistened. "She's family. Whether I like it or not, maybe this is my punishment, or maybe it's my chance to make things right." For the first time in his life, Adrian saw his mother, not as a cold figure of power, but as a woman haunted by her own past. He lowered his head, his voice breaking. "Thank you." She nodded once, and left quietly, the door closing behind her. Hours later, as dawn painted the horizon soft and pink, Isabella stirred. Her fingers twitched, her lips parted, and she whispered something so faint he had to lean close. "Adrian." He shot to his feet. "I'm here. I'm right here." Her eyes fluttered open, confusion and pain flickering across her face. "Where am I?" "You're safe," he said. "You're in the hospital. You gave birth to our daughter." "Our daughter," she whispered, as tears slid down her cheeks. She turned her head toward the cradle and smiled weakly. "She's beautiful." Adrian took her hand, pressing it against his heart. "I thought I lost you. You almost did," she said softly. "But maybe some love stories are meant to be written in pain first before they can find peace." He kissed her forehead, whispering, "Rest now, we're safe." But outside, that safety was fading fast. A man in a gray suit stood watching the hospice. Elle from across the street speaking into his phone. "Yes, confirm it, the child exists. The inheritance clause activates. If the mother dies, we move now." While Adrian held Isabella's hand, believing the storm had ended, another one was already gathering, waiting to strike. Night fell over the Wolfe estate, heavy and tense like the air before lightning strikes. Adrian sat in his study, the fire burning low as shadows flickered across the room. He hadn't slept in days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Isabella's face pale against the hospital sheets, her soft voice whispering, "Our daughter," and then fading away. His mother had gone silent since that night, leaving the house strangely empty. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life. Outside, the rain started again, steady and cold. He looked out the window and thought about how peace never lasted in his world. It always came with a price. He turned when the door opened. His security chief entered, his face pale. "We have a problem, sir." Adrian's chest tightened. "What kind of problem?" The man hesitated. "Your father's will. It's being contested. The old partners are saying the company must pass to the next legitimate heir. If not, they will expose everything. The child, your relationship, everything you built." Adrian's voice went low. "If they touch her or the baby, I swear, I'll destroy them all." The man nodded. "I believe someone inside leaked the information, maybe even someone close." At that moment, the phone rang sharp in the silence. Adrian grabbed it, expecting his lawyer, but the voice that came through froze him cold and precise. "You thought you could hide her from the world, Mr. Wolf, but the world has a way of finding its debts. Meet me at Pier 17 tomorrow night alone, or the truth about your contract and your child goes public." The line went dead. Adrian stared at the phone, his heart hammering. Pier 17 was an abandoned dock outside the city, the kind of place where secrets were buried, not discussed. He knew it could be a trap, but he had no choice. At dawn, he left quietly without telling anyone. Isabella woke later in their bedroom, still weak from recovery. She felt the emptiness beside her, the air cold. His jacket gone. Panic filled her. She called his name, but the house answered only with silence. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. She went downstairs and found a letter on his desk, sealed in black wax. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was one line, "Forgive me, I have to fix what I broke." Tears filled her eyes. She ran to find his mother. Evelyn was sitting in the garden, her expression unreadable. "He left, didn't he?" she said quietly. Isabella nodded. "I think he's in danger." Evelyn stood slowly, her eyes sharp and full of fear. "Pier 17, she whispered. "That's where your father once made his last deal before he died. I thought it was a coincidence, but maybe it's not." Without hesitation, Isabella grabbed her coat. "I'm going after him." Evelyn reached out. "Don't be foolish if you go there. You might not come back. Then let me die trying," she said, "because I won't lose him again." The rain was falling harder now, lightning flashing across the city as she drove through the empty streets, her hands trembling on the wheel. She reached the pier just as the clock struck midnight. She saw Adrian standing near the water, his black coat whipping in the wind. A figure stepped out of the shadows. It was the lawyer who had drafted their contract, but his eyes were cold, filled with greed. "I warned you, Wolf," he said. "You broke the agreement when you fell in love. The contract was never about an heir. It was about control." Adrian stepped forward, his jaw set. "If you ever touch her or my daughter, you'll regret it." The lawyer smiled cruelly. "Already done," he said, gesturing behind him. From the darkness, two men dragged a woman forward, her hair soaked by the rain. Isabella gasped as she saw her own reflection. It was a double. A woman dressed to look. Like her heart stopped when she realized they planned to fake her death. Adrian's fists clenched, but before he could move, a gunshot split the air. The lawyer fell to the ground, blood pooling at his feet. Evelyn stood behind him, holding a pistol, her voice shaking. "Enough of this," she said. The storm roared around them, the waves crashing against the pier. Adrian ran to Isabella, pulling her into his arms. She clung to him, crying. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. Behind them, sirens wailed as the police arrived, called by Evelyn's security team. The nightmare was ending, but not without scars. As dawn broke over the sea, Adrian held Isabella close, whispering, "It's over." But deep inside, he knew some ghosts never truly die because love, this powerful, always leaves something behind. A promise, a warning, and a heartbeat that would never fade. Morning light spilled across the pier like a soft apology. The storm had passed, but the world still smelled of salt and gunpowder. The police cars were gone now, only silence remained. Adrian stood by the water, his coat damp, his hands still shaking from the chaos of the night. He had almost lost everything. The woman he loved, the daughter who was waiting for them back home, the life he thought he never deserved. Isabella sat on a crate wrapped in a blanket. Her hair tangled her face, pale but her eyes steady. She was staring at him, as if memorizing him, every scar, every breath. When he finally looked at her, she smiled weakly. "You came for me again," she whispered. "I'll always come for you," he said, "because I finally learned what matters." Evelyn approached slowly, the pistol still in her hand, but her shoulders sagged under the weight of everything she had done. Her voice was trembling. I called the authorities. They took care of the men. The truth about the contract is sealed. No one will ever find it. Isabella looked at her, not with anger, but with quiet sadness. You could have destroyed us, but you saved us instead. Evelyn's eyes glistened. I destroyed too many lives before yours. I won't make the same mistake again. She took a breath and added, I'll step down from the board, Adrian. The company is yours. Do with it what your father never could. Make it mean something. When she walked away, the air felt lighter, like the ghosts had finally left the wind. Adrian turned to Isabella, kneeling before her, his voice soft and raw. I can't undo the pain I caused, but if you'll let me, I'll spend every day trying to make it right. She touched his cheek, her fingers trembling. I don't want apologies. I want a future one where our daughter grows up in love, not in fear. He took her hand, pressing it against his heart. Then that's what she'll have, I promise. 2 weeks later, the world knew a different story. The papers printed headlines about the mysterious death of a corrupt lawyer and the quiet redemption of Adrian Wolfe, the millionaire who disappeared from his empire. Rumors said he sold his company. But the truth was deeper. He had turned Wolfe Industries into a foundation for women and children, abandoned by power. The first hospital they funded was named Lily Grace Center, after their daughter. In the soft light of evening, Isabella stood in the garden, holding Lily while Adrian painted the nursery walls. He had never painted anything in his life, and yet his hands moved with care, like he was creating a memory. She watched him, smiling. You know, for a man who once said he couldn't change, you're doing a good job. He turned his head, his face covered in a streak of white paint, and said, Maybe love just teaches us how. When the baby started crying, he walked over, taking her from Isabella's arms. He rocked her gently, whispering, You're safe, little one. No more contracts, no more storms. Just us. Isabella leaned against the doorway, watching him, her heart full. She had walked into his life as a desperate girl with nothing left, and now she had everything that truly mattered. As the sun sank beyond the hills, she stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him. He kissed her forehead softly, and for the first time in years, he felt peace. The kind of peace that comes when you finally stop running from what you were always meant to find. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet, Adrian stood by the window, holding Lily asleep against his chest. The moonlight fell across them like a promise, he whispered to the sleeping child one day. You'll hear how your mother saved us both, how her heart turned a broken man into someone who finally understood what love really means. Isabella came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. She rested her head against his back and whispered, You found your heir, after all. He smiled, turning to face her. No, he said softly. I found my home. And as the stars burned bright above them, the mansion that had once been built on emptiness was finally filled with laughter, warmth, and the quiet heartbeat of a love that no storm could ever break.